October 2023, that's this year in October, it will officially be 10 years since Pokemon X and Y came out. These games were big when they came out, and really, to have really thoroughly enjoyed these games, you just had to have been there in 2013, to say the least. If you were there in 2013, a lot of X and Y hasn't aged as well as other Pokemon games, because Pokemon X and Y, a lot of their reception and how they were made was just, they were made to be very popular when they were released, but after, as time progressed, a lot of the key features and a lot of reasons why X and Y is one of the greatest Pokemon games ever would unfortunately be lost to time. Pokemon X and Y are not viewed as positively as I believe they should be. And so I'm just making this video to put some respect on Pokemon X and Y, because these games were phenomenal if you were there in 2013. Now, a lot of people can't say these games, oh, A, they were too easy, or B, or just a bunch of problems, right? But the thing is that if you were there in 2013, you were talking about why these were probably the best Pokemon games ever made. Like, that was something people talked about all the time when X and Y were out. People would not stop talking about how great this game was. And really, I just think people need to go back and watch some older videos of people playing through X and Y. Regardless of how easy the game was, it was fun. Why? The X and Y, now there's a couple of reasons why X and Y were fun. Now, the number one reason has to be is that really it gave new players new Pokemon, but it also gave enough to old players. Every single Pokemon fan at this point had something in X and Y to be excited about, right? So either A, we got a whole new type, which is crazy. That was the last time a type was introduced, right? And it was big, specifically for competitive people, but also casual fans. Excuse me. Seeing that we're getting a whole new evolution to go with it, Sylveon, that was hype. That was crazy. And then don't even get me started on Mega Evolutions. Literally, the hype because of Mega Evolutions in 2013 was crazy. I was 13 years old. Every time I'd come home from school looking to see if there's a new trailer for X and Y, I was watching people like Jay Witz, Dookie Shed, and other people just raving about how cool Mega Evolutions were. Now, when they were first revealed, it was in a Coral scan, right? And this was like when Pokemon leaks were like everywhere. Now, Pokemon leaks have been around for a long time, but this is when, it was just, they were big. And I think X and Y's when Pokemon leaks were at their best point, because after X and there were still fake leaks, but when there were real leaks, it was crazy. Now, modern Pokemon leaks aren't just modern Pokemon leaks are just telling you everything about it, right? When we got Mega Evolutions first leaked, we just saw what it looked like, an evolution to Lucario, an evolution to Blaziken, and all these Pokemon, and we didn't even know what they were. Compared to now leaks, we got people talking about the entirety of a game before the game comes out in X and Y. We didn't even know what the game's going to be about, and we're looking at these scans and we're like, what the hell is this? So even then, that's the preseason. We're not even to the game yet. But the X and Y hype season, for any YouTuber, if you just go back to some YouTubers 10 years ago videos of X and Y hype videos, you will see people excited. This is when reaction content started to pop off. Around the X and Y era is when we started to see reaction videos start to pop up, right? And you're seeing people do these reaction videos and news videos and all that, right? And it wasn't even about like fake stuff. It was about legit stuff. I mean, even then we had fun discussions, because Pokemon X and Y created a lot of room for discussion, because it's like we're seeing these old Pokemon get new love, right? And Mega Evolution was so innovative, because it really was like any Pokemon that's fully evolved can get it. Before X and Y, new love to Pokemon would just be a new evolution, but that left out Pokemon that had 3 stages. But just seeing, it was a huge refresh, to say the least. The hype season was a huge refresh. And to get the game in hand, boy. Now, let me tell you something. Again, we can talk about how easy X and Y was. but X and Y also have one of the best regional dexes ever. Like, ever. Period. The amount of Pokemon that were available in the first few routes was insane. You could get they had Pokemon essentially from every region. As you play through the game, every single region has strong representation in X and Y. And it gives a little bit to every fan. Now, granted, you could say Gen 1 got a lot of hype, but still, you had other Pokemon get hype. You had Gen 3 Pokemon get hype, like Mawile. No one talked about Mawile, but now Mawile started popping off. You know, X and Y gave, literally, it was like, and the new Pokemon that were there. Now, granted, this was the generation, I believe, with the least amount of new Pokemon. But still, having new Pokemon, but also a lot of old Pokemon that people may not have played with in a minute. Because you got to keep in mind, in Gen 5, a lot of Pokemon were not available. For example, the Light Ball actually was never released in Gen 5. Pikachu was unobtainable in Gen 5. So, some people, it might have been a minute since they played with a Pikachu. It might have been a minute since certain people have played with certain Pokemon. And so, to have a lot of old Pokemon come back, you could say, oh, what about new Pokemon? I still think having old Pokemon come back, having a lot of them come back was and catchable. Having a lot of them in the regional decks was just great, because really, if people wanted to have new Pokemon in their team, great, that's there for them. But then people who were like, I want to use some old Pokemon, that's there too, right? And so, but that's just talking about the hype season and all that. But when we also talk about X and Y, you got to realize this game had, I gotta say, the best. Now, it doesn't have the best post-game content, but in terms of the playability and what you could do after, it was phenomenal. In terms of the online connection and stuff like that, I remember as a kid spending hours Wonder Trading, right? It was just the funnest thing ever. And you saw content creators take advantage of these things. Like, we saw like Wonder Trade streams. We saw like new things like free-for-all battles, because you could have a 2-on-2 battle, right? But with 4 people, so you'd have you and a partner, and then then you'd go against a team of 2 people. So 4 people in total online. And that was dope. And then the PSS system literally allowed people to message, and not message, but, well, you could have these little things called shoutouts, but literally you could make legitimate friends that just through playing Pokemon. You could literally battle somebody and trade with, and you would see their icons at the bottom. The PSS was phenomenal. And the thing is that because the PSS thrived when X and Y had a large amount of people playing, after X and Y the ship has sailed, X and Y lost that big thing. It lost a big spark of why it is a great game, just because the main thing that kept it alive after its release was the PSS. But unfortunately, when Pokemon games age, people stopped playing them. And because online connectivity was such a huge part of X and Y, as the game aged, as people started playing it, let's go on to new Pokemon games, it became, and I don't think Pokemon has ever went back to, you've seen it. Pokemon has never went back to having online be a significant feature of a Pokemon game since. Now we have new online features, but we don't have ways to make new friends with people online. Yeah, every way in X and Y was focused on connecting trainers or connecting different people that play the game to be friends with people. I will making friends. Now, they had voice chat. This was the only Pokemon game that ever has voice chat, but I think they took it out for maybe security reasons and whatnot. But you could voice chat on this game. Now, that's something a lot of people don't know about. But you had to do something with parental controls and whatnot, right? But the thing is, though, is that really this game was so focused on connectivity, but that in itself made it inherently so that way X and Y wouldn't age as well, because once the connectivity isn't there, you just got a bland Pokemon game. And I think Pokemon has tried to make it so they don't have to worry about connectivity being a thing, because literally in Gen 7 the connectivity was just gone. It was horrible. You couldn't really talk to people at all. You couldn't really make friends that you couldn't really make friends like you could in X and Y. The connectivity was a real step down, and now we're at a bare bones connectivity where really, if you don't know people, you're not going to meet new people on X and Y. I mean, in Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield, it's not really, you don't really meet new people through these games. You're not really, they're not built around connecting. They're built around more so just the Pokemon experience, which is what all Pokemon games are focused on. But you know, newer Pokemon games don't have the ability to just connect with other people as much as X and Y did. And people who played X and Y will tell you, if you had anybody, or like I said, look at PokeTubers for example. But if you know anybody that is a huge Pokemon fan, and just ask them to tell you about X and Y, and back in 2013 with the online connectivity and everything, because literally it was crazy. And then online mystery gifts and stuff like that, those were crazy. You know, in Pokemon X and Y, even when things leaked, we were still excited for, excuse me, Pokemon distributions and stuff like that. But really, I mean, I guess you could also say what I'm saying about Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, but I just think X and Y essentially started it. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire literally was like, okay, here's the home remake, but we're putting the X and Y PSS back in there. Because in ORAS, it still had the PSS system, the online connectivity stuff, right? And, you know, that allowed Gen 6 really in the whole gap year of 2015, because in 2015 it was like first time in a minute where we didn't have a Pokemon game. The online connectivity of X and Y and Gen 6 as a whole really allowed Pokemon to I think be able to do well enough in 2015 with that drought year. And the amount of content and possibilities that X and Y created were huge. Like, you had new ways of people playing through games. You had Wonderlocks and stuff like that, because the idea of getting random Pokemon was only really through emulators and things like that. But now people playing the game could just do it. But then you had like people doing battles. Competitive battling was crazy in X and Y, because the X and Y also took so many steps to make it accessible. You know, breeding became a whole lot easier, and you could get better Pokemon easier with the Friend Safari. And just Wonder Trade, you could get a Pokemon that may not have been as great, but are still good competitively, right? Because people would trade out the Pokemon that they bred that was not the Pokemon that they wanted, or maybe it didn't have the right stats, but they're still good, and those got traded. Like, X and Y was just, oh my god. The nostalgia I have for it is immense. And, you know, I've played through X and Y a couple times in the past 5 years. When it first came out, I was playing in the years following X and Y, so we're talking about like 2016, 2017. As Sun and Moon came out, I really was playing through these games a lot, repeating. But, you know, as I play through them now, and even then, like, the big appeal of X and Y being the online connectivity is like, when you go and replay these games today, you're gonna miss the big part of what made these games cool and special and unique in the first place. And I'd say because of that, X and Y is one of those games where you just had to be there, right? Because a lot of other Pokemon games, you could pretty much play them. I think every other Pokemon game, you could pretty much play them at any point, and I don't think it'd be a big deal what time you played it on, because you probably have a similar experience. Red, Blue, and Yellow, if you played those today, it'd be the same experience as back then. I guess now you'd have a little bit more of an idea of what you're doing. But regardless, the main game for pretty much almost every Pokemon game is identical, but like when it was released and now. The only game that I think really just does not have the same ability to be replayed in the same way, in the same hype, is X and Y. You know, it not only because of the online features, but I think because everyone was playing through this game multiple times. People were playing through this game in many different ways in multiple different times. You have people doing Wonderlocks, Wedlocks, Nuzlocks, all these different type of playthroughs, and all these different types of videos and content of X and Y, right? And it was just, it promoted people to play the game. And there were multiple reasons to play the game, right? But because that was so focused on the time period, X and Y now may not look as favorably as back then, because they don't have what they had back then. Like, for example, Sword and Shield now, you can go back and play those, but really the only thing is you could play the DLC right away, right? But inherently that means you can get all of Sword and Shield right now, meaning you could really just get the Sword and Shield experience, the same experience I had back then now if you wanted to. Because the online connectivity already was like not really a big feature. It was something that you could just do. I mean, the limited time raid events were cool, but that wasn't as big of a feature of Sword and Shield. The main feature was the DLC, and if anything, the only raids that were popular were the legendary raids, but you could do those at any point. The timed event raids were never as popular as just, you know, the legendary raids. I mean, they were cool, but they did not string as much, you know, attention as you know, the DLCs did. And I think Scarlet and Violet were in an interesting point where we might be in a different, I don't want to say the same thing, but because Scarlet and Violet is a different shift, because you know, online connectivity still isn't the same, but as X and Y, but the thing is that we're starting to see limited time raid events that actually matter. And if this is the only way to obtain some Pokemon, well, we'll see. But Scarlet and Violet, still, we got DLC coming out, so we really can't judge it yet. But the last thing I gotta say to wrap up this video is in Pokemon's history, we've had 3 major shifts, right? Well, you could say 2, but the one is the inception of Pokemon, right? Which is Gen 1 and 2. And then you have the shift from Gen 2 to 3, which I guess we could do it in sections, right? So Pokemon in history has real big sections. So you got Gen 1 and 2, that's its own section, but then you had Gen 3, which couldn't communicate with Gen 1. But I think Gen 3 through 5 was a section. Granted, you had new features added, like online connectivity, but really, those games all are the same style. All the games have the same style. But then X and Y, you get this big shift. You get new gimmicks. You know, the idea of a regional gimmick started with X and Y. The idea of online connectivity being fully fleshed out, although it was there in Black and White too, in X and Y it was fully fleshed out, that was a real big shift to another generation. And so X and Y marked the transition to another generation, another shift in the Pokemon franchise. I think we're starting to see another shift with Scarlet and Violet, moving to more open world type deal. But X and Y was a shift into 3D and a bunch of things. Like, it was just a generational shift. But that generational shift really could only be felt and seen and understood if you were there when X and Y was released. That's it. You just had to be there. Thank y'all so much for watching this video. Thank y'all for watching these commentary videos. I know y'all like them, so I'm going to keep them coming. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Were you there for Pokemon X and Y when it was released? Because I was 13 back in the day. And I actually got into X and Y. My first game was Black and White 2, but I ended up losing my DS and my Black 2 copy. I had my first level 100 Emboar there. But anyway, X and Y, I have a lot of nostalgia with those games. Because I was there when they were released. And I was there during the hype season in the early YouTube. So yeah, it was solid. So just let me know. Let me know if y'all were there. Let me know if there's any other topics you want me to cover. But happy anniversary to Pokemon X and Y, or happy birthday, early birthday. 10 years. That's a while. That's a long time. It's crazy to think. I was 13 then, and now I'm 20, getting ready to be 23 in December. So I'm interested to see the big shift in Pokemon in the next decade. But anyway, I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.